Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of this presentation is to knowing the concepts of Rust. And as you knowing, the blockchain is almost alongside with the powerful languages like Rust. I'm gonna cover any boring theory, and I'll go over some background details about POW algorithm or mining, and it's about consensus algorithm. And I will take your questions at the end of my presentation. So let me kick it off with the website. As you can see, I wrote some documents about our sample projects, and there are many categories about using concepts, and the difference between the current work and the previous work. This repository is the prerequisites of a substrate framework, and it would be nicer to practice. And it's a simulation environment for your work if you need more practice on Rust. And the next reason is to using some features of Rust languages that I had wanted to implement it after learning Rust. Okay, let's go back to our original program, and let me execute it. It's very simple, friends. Cargo run. Okay. After run default runner, you can see two blocks that use hashing mechanism for generate blocks and transactions. And in the project, there are three more type of runner. And for example, if I run with the JSON file, I will have the result of three blocks. And you can mention your optional difficulty or Rust log environment variable before cargo run. Okay, it takes a little while to work. Okay, it's almost done, and as you can see, there are three blocks because in the JSON file we write three blocks and some transaction. For example, in the third block, I have one transaction, and in the two block, I have two transaction. Okay. For another example, you can run a string JSON mode. The JSON mode read your sample.rs file in the library, and you can use Rust Scratch blockchain as a library, and when you add it as a dependency in your binary project. You can use and you can access to library blockchain, and after that you can use your many functions. Let me open the project. It's time for you to rotate to binary example in VS Code, your workspace. Although I upload two project for library and binary project in the GitHub, and you can access it. Okay, it's file sample trivial JSON, and you can manipulate it. Okay, let me close it, and let me head over to continue about documentation. In the README repository of the ROS Scratch blockchain, as you can see, for example, it's a library, modular, and use WebAssembly. Also, WebAssembly would be for future work, and customized error handling in the ROS using JSON as a off-chain blockchain, and you can hash your transaction and your blocks optional. The project use functional programming like Clojure and cryptography hashing algorithm SHA, and for instructor of working, you can have access to this section for build and running 3 mode type of runner. And for consuming the project, you can use the library as a dependency in your cargo new binary project. Okay. There are many concepts in about memory or performance and multi-threading, and you can have a look about dangling or smart pointer, and it's almost very used in the projects. Let's take a time for understanding the difference between 3 mode type of runner. In the documentation of library CRUDs, as you can see, we publish our CRUDs, and if you, for example, open a blog page, you can see details of implementing of a blog or transaction or blockchain struct. And as you can see, I explained about three important concepts in the POW algorithm. At the first is our spending. Where did the money come from? And inputs must be bigger than sum of values of generated outputs. And continue our spending. I can't, for example, input 5 coins and be able to input output 7. On the other hand, inputs have to be greater since must be enough fee in input section for paying for miner. And there is a gap in the sample, and I don't have time for handle it. And you can join to project and contribute in the reward section. And the reward section in model that I used, the first transaction is very important, and because I use a Coinbase model for transactions of blockchain, and the first transaction used for miner reward, and if you read documentation, you will find how to create your inputs and outputs of a transaction. And in the Coinbase model of transaction, you need to attention and for about inputs, because in Coinbase model we don't have any inputs model and array. So please focus on it and keep in mind. For the next concept, it's impersonation. This can be solved by adding signature to output to verify that are being spent by their owner. And we can assume that whoever sent out the transaction over the network is also the person who created the transaction. For now, we'll kind of ignore solving this problem. We might come back to it when we go over smart contracts and multi-signature and smart contracts, as you can see on a documentation README file. I mention it as a future word, and I don't know can we have enough time for do it or not. In continue, double spending concept. Make sure that any one output is never used as an input more than once. This can be done by maintaining a pool of unspent outputs and rejecting any transaction that try to spend outputs that don't exist in the pool. Okay? And for unspent outputs, let me to turn to the library project.